This kid, more welding school injuries. So this commenter is actually a grown-ass man, but he was a kid when I knew him. I was a welding instructor in upstate New York for BOCES, and I was in my second year in 2012 when my dad passed away. And I am a pretty diligent worker. I usually don't take sick time, I don't take vacation days, but I did take the maximum that was allowed when I found out that my dad had passed away, which was 3 days, you know, excused or whatever. So my students were used to having me there, and everything, you know, went as you would imagine a group full of like 16 to 19-year-old, mostly male tech school kids go. But when I came back from that 3-day absence, there were 3 notable things that had occurred. One was that one of the kids had used the power rollers while wearing gloves and sucked his hand in. And for those of you who don't know, power rollers are wonderful. They're basically big steel rollers about that big in diameter, and they're set next to each other, and they turn so that you can feed your material through, and you can put a perfect nice little curve into it. And this one I think had a foot control, so you would, you know, put your material in and then hit the foot pedal and it would go back, and then sometimes you could catch it from the back side, or you'd have someone working with you and send it back through, and then you tighten it up a little bit and then you send it through. You get the idea. You're not supposed to wear gloves because that makes your hands a little bit more liable. There's more of a chance that those rollers will grab the tip and suck your hand in because you don't have the sensation there, and it sticks out like, you know, a ½ inch past your actual little fingertip there. And that's what happened. So injury number 1, crushed fingertip. The second injury was from this nice boy who, you know, I wasn't quite sure about when he started the program, but you give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And he wanted to be I think he wanted to make motorcycles. And he had these ambitions to go out to California, where I think he already had an older brother established out there, maybe doing something in the industry. And he was a nice looking boy, lean. He always wore like light colored jeans with a white light colored t-shirt and a light colored ball cap, and you know, was trimmed up, and he was presented himself. He looked like he was headed to California from the East Coast is what he looked like. And he just like said, I gotta learn this because I'm gonna learn how to make motorcycles. This is my dream, this is what I wanna do. I'm like, all right, dude, but you have to get dirty. And prior to this week that my dad died, this kid, he was struggling a little bit. It's like he was finally getting this dazzling West Coast choppers ideology of what welding and fab was brought into real life. And I remember the week before, the kid had, I don't know if he got something in his eye or what, but he said, if I hurt myself one more time, I'm dropping this class. Sure enough, when I came back that week, and I was kind of like catching up with everyone and with Roller Guy, I said, where's so-and-so? And they're like, oh, he quit the program. He got burned. I'm like, how'd he get burned? And he had been on oxy-fuel. Here we go. The way we teach oxy-fuel is that it's on a manifold system with all of the oxygen tanks and all the acetylene tanks against the wall, and then there's a manifold system. So there's this big long bench with half a dozen seats. So there were people next to each other on the same long bench with a fire brick, and you've got the gloves on, you've got a torch in one hand and a filler rod in the other, and you're just learning to run beads. You're just running bead after bead. Well, the kid had burned his rod right up to the end, and so he was out of rod. He went to grab another one, and he couldn't grab it off the table with his glove. So what I think must have happened was he took both of his gloves off, and then he went to reach. And when he reached down for the rod, he put his other hand down on that coupon that he had just welded, and had the biggest blister I think I've ever seen on anyone in my life. It was not only massive in terms of area, but also volume. It was, I know because one of the other students showed me a photo on his phone. It was creepy. So anyway, that kid did get hurt one more time, and he did drop the program in that 3-day period. The third thing that happened, which wasn't actually an injury, it was just, you know, something fun to come back to, was one of my students who, I could do a whole story on him because he actually wound up being one of my favorites. But up to that point, he was a little bit problematic. He was extremely volatile. He was on the spectrum in several different ways. Not a bad kid, but man, it depends what teacher you asked. A kid whose mom's always getting like angry emails and is always causing trouble, at least at the home school. So not at the tech center where I worked and where construction, diesel mechanics, woodworking, cosmetology, animal science, all that. We typically didn't have as many problems in the tech center, or at least the same flavor of problems as they did at their home school. So The homeschool had more of a problem with this kid than I did, but man, he zero filter. I don't want to like label him because I don't know what the labels are, but you know, just social issues and emotional issues and appropriateness issues and sometimes safety issues. But I never actually had a real bad problem with the kid. If you could just tune out all of the bad behavior, he was actually a decent person. Well, I kind of forgot that he doesn't like change. Very rigorous in what he needed for routine. And when I didn't show up that day, I guess the wheels came off the wagon. It was actually the day that I realized that this kid really liked me because he exploded. And I don't think the substitute said, oh, Ms. Alexander won't be here today, so I'm here and we're going to do this thing together. I think he may have actually stood up there and said, Mrs. Alexander's dad died, so she's not here. I'm going to be your teacher. I think that's how it was worded, and I think this kid was not only upset that there was a change in the routine, but also that I had personally gone through something that was bothering me. So it was just like this massive explosion, and I don't remember the details, but he like picked up a chair and threw it, and he just yelled out the door and started walking down the hallway really angrily because he got sent out of the room, and he was like double whammying every classroom he went past, and then he went down to the office and was pounding on the glass of the office door to the secretaries, and I think he eventually just left, which you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to leave campus. You're not supposed to leave the school. And he pulled out a pack of smokes and just sat down and started smoking in the parking lot. And I think there was more to the story than that. But anyway, along with the power rollers and the big blister burn, there was this big emotional distress from one of my students. So yeah, that was the most interesting 3-day stretch that I had when I was teaching, and I wasn't even there. Before I stop this, I really want to give a nod to that kid who was kind of troubled because even though he was a complete menace to a lot of the teachers and a huge nuisance and a huge pain and just problematic, he was like the definition of the problematic child in school, he would do anything for me. And I don't know what happened his senior year when I had him, but he finally quit worrying so much about his external environment. I don't know if it was medication or therapy or if he just grew up, something happened, but he almost didn't withdraw, but he focused. And he was actually really, really, really talented in my classroom. He made himself a tattoo cart because he wanted to be a tattoo artist. He had like all this equipment. And I came over and I'm like, dude, you've got to be measuring. You've got to be recording. You actually have to have a drawing. You can't just make like a 3-drawer cart on casters and not have a drawing of some kind. It's like, I've got my measurements over there. And I could barely read it. It was in pencil, about this big, like huge letters. But the calculations were right, and he was doing them in his head. And I pulled out the top drawer, and it slid out. And I put it in the bottom hole, and it slid in. So not only did he like make one drawer to fit one hole, they all fit all the holes. He wound up being one of my favorite students. One last detail that I just remembered as I was editing that video for posting was when I came back to work after that 3 days, and I knew inevitably I had to talk to that kid about the blow up. Met him in the hallway because of the way the buses were staggered. I met him alone in the hallway, and I was like, all right, God, I got to talk about it with this guy. And he saw me and made eye contact, and he, like, I assumed he knew what was coming, that I had to, do the scolding. Can't even finish. He looked at me in the eyes and he said, Mrs. A, I'm so sorry about your dad. And it knocked me completely off guard, the amount of candor that guy had. I don't know as if any of the other kids gave me those same wishes, but I just remember that was the most genuine expression of sympathy that I think anyone gave me around that time. I'd forgotten about that.